All right, here we go. All right, so what's the stuff that got filtered by the glomerulus and ends up in Bowman's capsule? What's that called? Yeah, nice. Okay, so, and we discussed last time what's in that filtrate. All right, so let me get rid of this. This is what I want you to understand. Most nephrons of the kidney begin in the cortex of the kidney, the outer portion of the kidney. And what I want you to understand is that as you move deeper and deeper into the medulla of the kidney, so you're going down this way, right? The osmolarity of the surrounding tissue, right? So of the peritubular capillaries and the interstitial space between the collecting tubules and the peritubular capillaries, the osmolarity increases, right? So the osmolarity of the blood is about 300. Then it goes to 600. Then it goes up to 900. And then finally at the bottom of the Lupus-Henle, it's like 1200. You got me? So basically what's happening is as that filtrate travels through the yellow brick road, it is seeing an environment that is saltier and saltier and saltier, okay? And remember, where does water always go? If stuff can't move, what can always move? And water always moves from an area of low osmolarity to an area of high osmolarity, all right? So remember that the blood that's going to get filtered comes into the glomerulus through the afferent arterial, right? And it's made of muscle. Very important that you remember that. Then that filtrate, or that blood, is going to be filtered into Bowman's capsule. Are you with me? So this section right here is the proximal convoluted tubules, and you need to write this down. And this is where about 70% of the filtrate gets actively reabsorbed back into the blood. So the electrolytes, right, the amino acids, the vitamins, the mineral, all that stuff gets actively reabsorbed. And again, it makes sense, right? If you're going to clean a closet, you don't, the stuff that you know you're going to put back in the closet, you don't put in your garage. You leave it right there. So the proximal convoluted tubules is where that vast majority of that filtrate gets actively and passively reabsorbed. And it's done so osmotically. That means that the blood coming into the glomerulus has an osmolarity of about 300. And at the end of the proximal convoluted tubules, stuff got reabsorbed, but water also got reabsorbed. So the osmolarity at the end of the proximal convoluted tubules is still 300. Are you following that? That's what it means isoosmotically. Who's got that? Now, as you descend into the Lupus-Henle, it thins out. The only thing that can be reabsorbed in the descending limb of the Lupus-Henle is water. So what's the osmolarity of the filtrate going into the Lupus-Henle? What is it? It's 300, right? So as it moves deeper and deeper into the medulla of the kidney, it's seeing an environment that has a higher osmolarity. And where does water always go? Low osmolarity to high. So this is how water gets actively reabsorbed back into the blood. And water will be absorbed back into the blood until the osmolarity of the filtrate is equal to the osmolarity of the peritubular capillaries and surrounding tissue. Who followed that? So what's the osmolarity of the filtrate in the little yellow brick road? What's the osmolarity of the filtrate at the bottom of the Lupus-Henle? It's 1200, right? Because the water kept being reabsorbed. And if you remember, here's an equation. Solute over solvent, stuff over water. Remember that? So if the solute stays the same and you decrease the water in the filtrate, what's going to happen to the osmolarity? The osmolarity is going to go up. Yes or no? Okay. Now, in the ascending limb of the loop of Don Henley, can I tell you, I had a student, she sat right there. This was like 3 years ago. And she's taken forever to write out this thing, right? So I just sat there, and then she handed it in, and then she came back in the next class, and she goes, Tim, I just sat there. I couldn't remember that guy's first name. I'm not making this up.
I didn't say you were. I'm just shaking my head because it's dumb.
Okay.
Does anybody even know who that is? I do, but does anybody else?
Oh, you guys probably don't know who Don Henley is.
That's why I'm laughing.
Oh. I know my references are like Family Guy references. Like the references they make in Family Guy, only people my age, maybe a little bit younger, really understand. The rest of you guys just, what? Okay, forget it. We're moving on. Watch. In the ascending limb of the loop of Don Henley, the only thing that can get reabsorbed is electrolytes. Water is impermeable. So if you are reabsorbing sodium, potassium, say yes, chloride, what's going to happen? And you're not reabsorbing water back into the blood. What's going to happen to the osmolarity? It's going to go down. Very good. Until the osmolarity is back to 300. Are you following? Now, this is very important. I'm going to erase all this nonsense. All right, watch. What's the osmolarity at the end of the ascending limb of the loop of Don Henley? 300. Now, as you can see, it looks like a balloon, a big long balloon when you try to blow it up, right? It gets wider and then starts getting bigger. This is called the thickened portion of the ascending limb. Please get this. In the thickened portion of the ascending limb, electrolytes are actively pumped back into the blood. So what does that require if they're actively pumped? ATP. So you're actually moving these electrolytes against the concentration gradient. Now this is important. Because water's not getting reabsorbed in this thickened portion of the ascending limb, only electrolytes are actively pumped. What's going to happen to the osmolarity inside that thickened portion of the ascending limb? The osmolarity will go down. So by the time it gets through the thickened portion of the ascending limb, the osmolarity is about 100. So what is soon to be urine inside the collecting tubules, at the beginning of the distal convoluted tubules, the osmolarity is very, very low. That urine is very, very dilute. Say yes. And it is in the distal portion of the collecting tubules, the distal convoluted tubules, that you make a decision. Am I going to make a dilute urine today, or am I going to make a concentrated urine? And you think about it. What do I want to do? Right? And you guys, you think about it, but you don't even know you're thinking about it. Right? It's kind of back in your mind. Like you're thinking, hey, is my Facebook updated? And then in the back, you think, hey, I'm going to make me a dilute urine today. Got nothing else to do. Not going to read the textbook, that's for sure. Are you with me? So this is important. I'm going to take it real slow. In the distal convoluted tubules, this is where hormones take effect. And the hormones of the distal convoluted tubules that can affect the distal convoluted tubules and the collecting ducts are aldosterone, Yeah. ADH and whoops, whoops. You summon up. A-N-P. And I'm going to explain each one of those hormones. Are you with me? Okay, this is very important. Once the hormones take effect, whatever ends up in the collecting ducts will be urine. Write this down. I'm not writing it down. You write it down. In the absence of hormones, the kidney will always make a dilute urine. In the absence of hormones, you always make a dilute urine. Say yeah. Then watch. All the collecting ducts collect the urine from the nephrons, and the collecting ducts then all meet at the minor calyx. So here's the collecting duct. All that urine gets dumped into the minor calyx, and each minor calyx then comes and forms the major calyx. Say yeah. And then that urine will go through the ureter and peristaltically wave into your bladder. Who's following me? All right. One more thing about the distal convoluted tubules. This is where a lot of drugs are actively secreted from the blood into the urine. Now, watch. All drugs are metabolized significantly by the liver and excreted by the kidney. So when a patient is put on a new medication that they've never been placed on before, the doctor wants to know, hey, is their liver working okay? And are their kidneys working okay? And if they are, then you can give them the normal dose. But if their liver's not working good or their kidneys aren't working good, then that drug can build up in the blood to toxic levels. That's why you always monitor liver and kidney function before placing a patient on a new medication. Tell me you got that. Or if you have like recent labs, maybe from 6 months ago, and you know that their liver and kidney is fine and nothing really's changed, then you don't have to draw that blood. Tell me you got that. You do a blood urea nitrogen creatinine for the kidney, and then you're going to test for, you're not going to believe this, liver enzymes in the blood. Because if your liver cells are healthy, the liver enzymes are inside the cell. If your liver's getting jacked up, then the cell membranes of the liver rupture and dump the specific enzymes of the liver into the blood. See how that works? See, you do that, don't you? You draw liver panels, don't you? See? And the BUN and creatinine, cut it out. How many people followed that? All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to explain to you how hormones affect the kidney. You got me? And the first one I'm going to begin with is aldosterone. Couple of things. Sometimes I'm delinquent in my duties. Watch. There are hormones released from the adrenal cortex. Anybody know what they are? Yeah, nice. Cortisol. What's another one? No. No way you got that, I thought. You'll forget that. That's those are the guys too that go in and enforce drug laws and stuff like that. Right? And then what's the last one? Aldosterone. So these are the hormones that are released. Aldosterone. Aldosterone. Yep. These are released from the adrenal cortex. Watch. Cortisol affects glucose, right? Makes your blood sugar go up. You remember this, don't you? You remember this? So it's called a glucocorticoid. Aldosterone affects sodium and potassium. So it's called a mineral corticoid. And DHEA is just DHEA. Say yes, HEA.
Sodium and potassium.
Sodium and potassium. You got me? How many people followed this? All right, here we go. Now watch. Hang on. What I'm going to do, and again, this is in the distal convoluted tubules. I'm going to take a section of the distal convoluted tubule. You got me? And I'm going to blow it up. Right? What's the distal convoluted tubule made out of? Cells. Right? So this is what it's going to look like. So what do you got here? You got the peritubular capillaries. Yeah. Then you have the cells, and I'll just make them square. Oh, that's pretty cool. You got me? These are the cells of the distal convoluted tubules, and then you have the collecting ducts. So this is where the stuff is. Are you following me? Okay. Now watch. This is the blood, cells of the collecting tubules, and then this is the distal convoluted tubules where the stuff is. Are you following me? Sodium you pee out, right? Potentially. In the blood, you have potassium. Are you following? So, and I'm going to simplify it even more, but embedded in the cell membrane of the cells that make up the distal convoluted tubules is a pump. Anybody know what that pump is? Yep, I have potassium and sodium, and I said it was a pump. Are you following me? Now watch. When that pump is activated, 3 sodiums that we're going to get peed into the toilet get pumped back into the blood, and 2 potassiums that we're going to stay in the blood get pumped into the distal convoluted tubules and get peed into the turlet. Are you with me? When sodium gets pumped back into the blood, what follows by osmosis? Water. Boom. So what happens to your blood volume? What happens to venous return? Right, just do the increase thing. Stretch, force of contraction. So what's going to ultimately happen to your blood pressure? It's going to go up. Please get that. How many people followed that? All right, so here we go. Write this down. Never forget it. There's Kenny. I tried to explain the juxtaglomerular apparatus. That's a little bit too much. So again, Timmy, going to simplify for you. You got me? Watch. One of the things that the kidney controls is long-term blood pressure. We talked about this, right? So watch. Connected to the afferent arterial are these specialized cells called juxtaglomerular cells. And these cells respond to stretch. Who's with me? So they're connected to the afferent arterial. So watch. If blood pressure in the afferent arterial begins to drop, think of the afferent arterial as like a tire. The afferent arterial becomes flat, right? It's flat. What's connected to the afferent arterial? The juxtaglomerular cells. So as that afferent arterial becomes flattened due to low blood pressure, it's going to stretch those juxtaglomerular cells. Who's following this? And when they stretch, they release into the blood, you better write this down, an enzyme called renin. What's renin? What's renin? What do enzymes do? That's right, they speed up chemical reactions. Now, why was renin released? Because your blood pressure was low. So what do you think renin is going to do? Raise your blood pressure. Okay? So watch. You better get this. Continually produced by your liver and in its inactive form is a chemical called angiotensin with his pal spinner and paddlefoot. Are you with me? What's in the blood? Why was renin released? Low blood pressure. So renin, enzyme, angiotensinogen, continually produced by the liver. Anything with gen after it is inactive. It gets dumped into the blood. And renin converts angiotensinogen to the active form called angiotensin 1. Say yes. And angiotensin 1 is a mild arterial vasoconstrictor. And if you recall, some people got that question, Ohm's flow law. The goal of the cardiovascular system is to maintain blood flow, ain't that right? And it's determined by your systolic blood pressure divided by the resistance to blood flow, and the bottom line is that arterial diameter determines resistance to blood flow. Say yes. So if angiotensin 1 is a mild arterial vasoconstrictor, what's going to happen to resistance to arterial blood flow? It will go up. And to maintain Q, blood flow, what has to happen to your systolic blood pressure? It will go up. Angiotensin 1 lasts for about 30 minutes. So if you're able to get your blood pressure back up to normal, that's the end of it. Who's following? But in that time, that 30 minutes, angiotensin 1 was able to live a good life. Bought a home in Whitecaps, had 1.5 children, and bought a Harley Softail with hand warmers and GPS. Here we go. Angiotensin 1 is then going to circulate in the blood, and it will circulate into the pulmonary circulation. You got me? So now you got angiotensin 1. And this is a P cap, or just Diddy. And this is a ravioli. You got me? In the lining of the pulmonary capillaries, there is an enzyme called ACE. That enzyme is a type of enzyme that your mother told you to stay away from. He works second shift at Snap-on.
Where?
Second shift at Snap-on. Drives big Harley hog. Yep. And he wears a t-shirt with a pack of Marlboro Light Menthol 100s in a box rolled up in his sleeve. Yeah. Then he'll come home and he'll say, "Baby, I ain't got time for you. I'm hanging out with the fellas." Then he gets on his bike and ambulates away. And you're there, sitting there all by your lonesome, updating your Facebook status to Ace done it again. I hate me too. I'm not writing this down, you are. ACE stands for angiotensin converting enzyme. Angiotensin converting enzyme converts angiotensin 1 to the much more powerful and longer lasting angiotensin 2. Roman numeral 2. You got me? Angiotensin 2 does two things in one. It dices and slices and makes julienne fries. Angiotensin 2 does two things. One, it is a massive arterial vasoconstrictor. So it will take those arteries throughout your body and really contract and make those diameters smaller. So what's going to happen to resistance to blood flow? Goes way up. And what happens to your systolic blood pressure? Goes way up. But the other thing that it does is it will stimulate the release of aldosterone from the cells of the adrenal cortex. Say yeah. Guys? I'm going to show you this. Watch it. What's this? That's an artery. See? So my drawings must be pretty good. Where's angiotensin 2? In the blood. In order to cause the arterial vasoconstriction of angiotensin 2, you're not going to believe this. Oh. It has to bind to angiotensin 2 receptors. Brittany, can you believe it? Are you thinking about that very strange dude you're going to meet in that parking lot?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Who's following this? And when angiotensin 2 does that, it's going to cause massive arterial vasoconstriction. Where? Where? Everywhere. Say yes. And you're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe this. Who's going to believe it? Anybody? Betsy, you going to believe it? She said yes. So if Betsy believes it, we all should believe it. Here's the adrenal cortex. You're not going to believe this. But you have, angiotensin 2 receptors on the cells of the adrenal cortex. And when angiotensin 2 binds to angiotensin 2 receptors, it's going to cause the release of the hormone aldosterone. Again, are you with me? Who's following this? Aldosterone affects the cells of the distal convoluted tubules. What's in the distal convoluted tubules, peeps? Yep. You have cells, and embedded in those cells is our buddy, our pal. The only thing that's on there. The sodium-potassium pump. You better write this down. And aldosterone stimulates the sodium-potassium pump in the cells of the distal convoluted tubules. What does that sodium-potassium pump do? Well, it pumps sodium and potassium, darn it. It's going to take 3 sodiums that were going to be peed into the toilet and pumps them back into the blood. And what will follow? By osmosis. So what will happen to your blood volume? Venous return. Strike. So what will happen to your blood pressure? It goes up. Better write this down. Better not pout. The only way to get rid of potassium in your body is to pump it out of the blood. What pumps it out of the blood? The sodium-potassium pump. Say yes. Who's following this? And that Renin-Angiotensin-Aldosterone mechanism will kick in until your blood pressure is back to normal. So what will happen to urine output? It decreases because the sodium and the water that we're going to get peed into the toilet now get brought back into the blood. Say yes. How many people followed that? And potassium is excreted. Who? Who's got this? Yes or no? Guys? This will come back and bite you right in the ventral gluteal fold. I guarantee it. Okay? Now watch. That's the Renin-Angiotensin-Aldosterone mechanism. Watch it. Watch it. Give me an example of what could lower your blood pressure. No, like something like that. Loss of blood. So if you're bleeding your own blood, what's going to happen to your blood volume? Venous return, stretch, force of contraction, and what's going to happen to the pressure in the afferent arterial? What did you say?
I don't know.
Well, you're not paying attention because you're over there shuffling papers. Right. The pressure in the where is it? In the afferent arterial is going to drop. And when pressure in the afferent arterial drops, it stimulates the release of renin. And it's going to activate the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone mechanism. So if you are bleeding your own blood, what's going to happen to urine output? It's going to go down. Tell me you got that. So that's a sign of like dehydration too, right? How many people have like really studying this stuff and didn't drink any water, right? Then when you go pee, you're peeing like syrup. You're dehydrated. Yeah, yes or no? Guys?
Yeah.
That's the renin-angiotensin. Yep.
So renin helps raise your blood pressure.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And guys, this is what I want to... body does stuff that makes sense. If renin was released because your blood pressure is low, then renin's going to make your blood pressure go up. And it does that by activating the Renin-Angiotensin-Aldosterone mechanism. Say yes. Probably the most powerful effect and the long-lasting effect is the effect of aldosterone. Aldosterone can last for weeks in the blood. Yes? Okay. The opposite of aldosterone is called non-aldosterone. Don't write that down. The opposite hormone of aldosterone is atrial natriuretic peptide. What does natriuretic mean? Sodium. You got me? What does a diuretic make you do? So, what do you think atrial natriuretic peptide would do? Make you pee what? Make you pee sodium. If you pee sodium, what's going to follow that sodium in the urine by osmosis? So what does atrial natriuretic peptide do to your blood pressure? It what? It decreases it because you are decreasing sodium in the blood and therefore water in the blood and therefore blood volume. Say yes. All right, here we go. Here we go. You're going to get this. Who's going to get this? Anybody? Who's going to get this?
Everyone.
Everyone?
Yeah.
Ah. Okay. Got to sign in. Right. Okay, here we go. Wait, what am I looking for? Oh, I got it. Oh, crud. I did the wrong thing. All right. So you guys yelled at me. I can hear you yelling at me in your mind. Stupid idiot. What a jerk. You wouldn't be wrong. You get this right, I will be insanely proud of you. Where does all venous blood of the body get returned to? What part of the heart? The right atrium. You better write this down. Inside the right atria, there are specialized cells in the right atrium. And these special cells respond to stretch. Got me? How could you stretch your right atrium? Increasing your blood volume. Watch it. Let's say that you're sick of this class and you decide to go drink some Piggly Wiggly water. And you drink a bunch of water. That gets absorbed into the blood. So what's going to happen to your blood volume? What's going to happen to venous return? And when you increase venous return, what do you do to the right atrium? You stretch it. And when you stretch the right atrium, there's specialized cells in the right atrium that respond to that stretch, and they will release into the blood the hormone A&P, atrial natriuretic peptide. Who's with me? Guys? Guys? When atrial natriuretic peptide is released, it has its effect on the distal convoluted tubules. And what A&P does is A&P inhibits the sodium-potassium pump. So if you inhibit the sodium-potassium pump, what doesn't get pumped back into the blood? Sodium. So if sodium doesn't get pumped back into the blood, what doesn't follow it? So what happens to your urine output as a result of inhibiting the sodium-potassium pump by A&P? It increases. And it will increase that urine output until your blood volume is back to normal and the right atrium is no longer stretched. Say yes. A&P is the only hormone that lowers your blood pressure. All the other hormones raise your blood pressure. Say yabba. Guys, how many people followed that? That is, of course, beautiful. No. No. I don't even know what cells they are. Yeah. I just know that they, hey, stretch your right ventricle. Boom. All right. This is really important. You work in an emergency room, right? You ever draw blood in the emergency room? Okay. Watch. And then now I'm going to explain this. You're like, oh, yeah. Ready? Hang on. This is congestive heart failure. You got me? Normal ventricle, right? When you stretch a normal ventricle, what happens to the alignment of actin and myosin? It becomes optimal. So what happens to the force of contraction? In a person with congestive heart failure, this is as good, like at rest, the actin and myosin are lined up like this. Say yeah. So if you add more blood back to the heart in a person with congestive heart failure, you overstretch the ventricle. Say yes. Do you ever overstretch your ventricles? You do? Any of you here overstretch your ventricles? Do you have congestive heart failure? Do you ever overstretch your ventricles? Very good. So who overstretches their ventricles? People with CHF. Say yes. Now watch. Write this down. This is going to come back and just bite you so freaking hard. And when it does, if you would do me this favor and just call me so I can say, I told you so. When you overstretch a damaged ventricle, it releases into the blood a hormone called BNP. BNP stands for brain natriuretic peptide. Brain natriuretic peptide. The reason it's called brain natriuretic peptide, it was first isolated in sheep brains. But in humans, it's released from ventricular muscle cells, oh no, when they are overstretched. Who's following this? Do you have any BNP floating around in your blood, Yumi? How do you know?
Because I don't have congestive heart.
How do you know?
Well, I do have to sleep propped up right now.
See?
Because I have
There you go. Yeah, you probably got to be end stage CHF.
Thanks.
Yeah, you better get your affairs in order, sister. How many people followed this so far? Brain natriuretic peptide has the same effect as atrial natriuretic peptide. So what is it going to do in the kidney? It's going to inhibit the sodium-potassium pump, prevent that sodium from getting pumped back into the blood and having the water follow by osmosis. So what's going to happen to urine output in a person with with CHF if they have brain natriuretic peptide released? It's going to increase. So watch how Timmy's going to explain this. She gave me the perfect example right there, unknowingly. Here. Some stickers. When a person comes into the emergency room, the ER doc, unless they're routinely coming in, they don't have a lot of history on these people. You got me? So if someone's having shortness of breath can be caused by many things, right? It can be caused by a cold, right? Or it could be caused by CHF. So a doctor can determine through a blood test if the reason they're short of breath is because of congestive heart failure or some other condition, maybe pneumonia or a cough or not reading the textbook. Are you following me? So what they will do is on a person who comes in with shortness of breath, they don't have a lot of history on them, they will draw a BNP. And if the BNP is elevated, then the shortness of breath is related to an overstretched ventricle and they have congestive heart failure.
So if the BNP is elevated,
When do you get BNP released? When your left ventricle is overstretched. Do you have an overstretched left ventricle? Do you? No. So you can have a lot of BNP in your blood? No. Who will have a lot of BNP in their blood? And when the heart failure gets worse. So when the person is doing good with heart failure, the doctor, their cardiologist will draw BNP to get a baseline BNP. If that BNP is through the roof, then they know their congestive heart failure is getting worse. Say yes.
And just short of breath because the fluid is backing up
Right.
into the lungs.
The blood's blacking up into the left atrium. No valve on the pulmonary veins, pulmonary venules, pulmonary capillaries. That's why you got to know the circulation of the blood through the heart, Randy. That's why, Tim, see, I have a plan for your life. Mm-hmm. Watch it. So I'm a bitch. Ooh, that's on tape. Hey, this class is like Vegas. Whatever happens in this class stays in this class. You follow? If it ever comes back to me, I'm never recording this class ever. You don't care. You'll be done anyways. You're going to indulge me. I don't care. You're going to indulge me.
Historical. You need a 12-step program.
Okay, hang on.
Alright guys, so ACE inhibitors. We know that the mechanism of action for ACE inhibitors is to inhibit what? Good job, right in the corner. ACE. ACE. Inhibit ACE. Now what is ACE? ACE is your angiotensin converting enzyme. You guys haven't
Oh, this ain't.
blockers
Wait,
bring
hang
down
on.
the heart rate,
Yeah.
bring down that workload.
That really helps, right? Hang on.
So beta blockers also have vasodilation properties that decrease the amount of
Wait,
blood.
you're listening to this. I don't care. Wait, is this right?
All right, guys. So ACE inhibitors.
No, we already did
We
that,
know
right?
that the mechanism of action for ACE inhibitors.
Wait. Where is it? Son of a bitch. Hang on. Wait. I should have looked this up. I should know it by heart. Summon up. Hang on. What's that?
If we say we hate him too, can we not have to watch a video?
No. You're going to be watching these in clinical. You are. Stop. Wait.
The one right above him, the first video,
Yeah?
have you ever watched her?
No.
I watched her in general one time, and she actually helped me understand, one of them, I can't remember which one it was. Let me see, circulation.
Where is this frickin' dude? Everybody's leaving like a bad movie, right? Hang on. Son of a bitch. Punk. Alright, forget it. Forget it. Tell me you followed this. Brain natriuretic peptide. You got me? That will come back and bite you hard. Alright, so we went over aldosterone, the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone mechanism, right? We went over our atrial natriuretic peptide. See, yeah, that's a normal hormone, right? When the atria gets stretched, but because you don't have overstretched ventricles, you shouldn't be releasing a lot of BMP. Say yeah. Okay. The last one is ADH. If you get this right, I'm going to be proud of you. Where is ADH released from? Come on.
Pituitary.
Nice. What part of the pituitary?
Posterior.
Yeah, that was your other choice. At least you got the pituitary gland. Sometimes when you take a leak, it just makes you think better, huh? All right. Ready? I want this whole thing. Whole thing. What part of your body controls hunger, temperature, and thirst? You know what? I'm going to add that as a question on the final.
For extra credit?
No. What is this extra credit kick you're on? Eh? Give it a rest.
It's nice.
I know it is. Yeah, I'm too nice. I shouldn't be giving you guys extra credit.
Which question are we gonna go over?
What? Extra credit? There ain't no extra credit. Forget that. Okay, there's a little dingleberry. You got me? This is the H style. You're not gonna watch it? That's of course a receptor. These are called That's a bad color. These are called Osmo Receptors. What do Osmo Receptors recept? Osm. They detect changes in osmolarity. Are you with me? Okay, now watch. Let's say that you are really studying, right? You're studying so hard that you are just sweating. That sweat is just pouring off of you. This is so good. So excited. I'm sweating. What's going to happen to your blood volume? What's going to happen to your blood pressure? What's going to happen to capillary fluid pressure? Do you remember the 4 pressures? Now watch. There's going to come a point when interstitial fluid pressure becomes greater than capillary fluid pressure. And by pressure, water from the interstitial space will be pushed into the capillaries to try to maintain your blood volume. So if you recall, osmolarity is solute over solvent. If you remove solvent due to increasing interstitial fluid pressure, what's going to happen to the osmolarity of the interstitial space? It's going to go, that equation thing. That was the other one. Anterior, posterior. Right? If the solute stays the same, but the water goes down, the number gets bigger. So you're going to get increases in osmolarity. And anytime you increase osmolarity, it stimulates osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus. And that will tell you, hey, I'm thirsty. Who's got me? You got me? At the same time as the hypothalamus is telling you to drink some Wawa, the hypothalamus is beginning to produce anti-diuretic hormone. And because it's produced in the pituitary, it's released from the posterior lobe of the pituitary. Remember, go flap? How could you forget? And the pituitary releases ADH into the blood. Who's with me? Posterior pituitary. Guys? Increased osmolarity. Increased osmolarity in the interstitial fluid, right? That's going to trigger osmoreceptors because water's being pushed from the interstitial space into the capillary in an attempt to maintain blood volume. Yes or no?
Wait. So you said when the hypothalamus hears thirst, then what happens?
Then at the same time, the hypothalamus is going to produce the hormone ADH, and it's going to be transferred to the posterior pituitary. Any hormone that the hypothalamus produces is released from the posterior pituitary. And those 2 hormones are oxytocin and ADH. The rest are released from the anterior. Say yes, anterior. Yeah? Now what do you got in the blood? And ADH, its primary function, it affects the distal convoluted tubules, but primarily the collecting ducts. Now look. Who's looking? What happens to the osmolarity as you move deeper and deeper into the medulla of the kidney, the osmolarity goes up. And I told you this, and there was a reason I told you this, so I could explain this. The collecting ducts, in the absence of hormones, is impermeable to water. No water can get reabsorbed if you don't have hormones to affect the collecting ducts. Who's following me? Now, think about it for a minute. Think about it. If you are dehydrated, do you want to be peeing a lot? No. There you go. That makes sense, right? So, ADH will then stimulate the cells of the collecting ducts, and ADH will actually insert water channels into the collecting ducts. And water that was going to get peed into the turlet will get reabsorbed back into the blood. So what will happen to urine output? Boom. How many people are following this? ADH deals with water only. Only water. What does anti mean?
Don't.
Right, don't, not, right? What does diuretic mean? To pee. So if you are an anti-diuretic hormone, it's going to make you don't pee. Say yes. And it makes perfect sense. If you are dehydrated, you don't want to be peeing. You want to be reabsorbing that water to maintain your blood volume. Say yes. Now watch. Watch. As your blood volume continues to drop, right? More and more water from the interstitial space will get pushed into the capillaries. So what will happen to the osmolarity of the interstitial space? It will go up. And that will cause more ADH to be synthesized by the hypothalamus and more ADH to be dumped into the blood. Who's following? And at maximum ADH secretion, you will insert these water channels farther down. That's a bad water channel. Look at that. That's awful. You don't even know what that is. That could be like a, I don't know, a purse. You insert these water channels farther down. And the farther down you insert these water channels in the collecting tubules, what happens to the osmolarity? Goes up. More water will get reabsorbed back into the blood. So at maximum ADH secretion, you will be anureic. You will have no ureic. You won't have any urine output. Yes or no? Yes. Tell me you got that. Guys, watch. This is actually kind of a fun fact, right? For some of you, you'll find it very interesting. Alcohol, daddy pops, prevent ADH from inserting aquaporins. Without aquaporins, can you reabsorb water back into the blood? So what happens to your urine output when you have a couple of daddy pops? So when you first go out and have a little bout with the bottle, your first pee is yellow. There's some yellow in it. But your subsequent pees are clear because you're inhibiting ADH. That's why when you come home and you're all liquored up, you go to bed, sometimes you will dream about drinking water and not getting enough to drink. Has anyone ever had that dream? No one's had that dream? Well, I've been told. Off that train.
I highly doubt that.
That's why when you wake up, right? You wake up and you're like, you got cotton mouth. You're like, oh, I'm never doing that again. Then at 8 o'clock that night, you want to go out? Yeah. Go. Here's the other thing. Watch. You got to maintain blood flow, right? The cerebral spinal fluid supports and buoys up your brain. So as your blood volume begins to drop because you are so dehydrated, you will start sucking. You will produce less cerebral spinal fluid, and your brain starts resting on the base of your skull. That's why you get that nasty headache. You know what I'm talking about, Benzie? Yeah? From getting all liquored up? Cerebral spinal fluid is produced by filtering blood plasma. As your blood pressure begins to drop, you're not going to be filtering as much blood plasma, so you won't be making as much cerebral spinal fluid. So your brain will start resting on the base of the skull. You get that really nasty, dull, just sickening headache. You know what I'm talking about. But that doesn't stop you from going out and drinking, does it? That's right. You bunch of characters, you. How many people got that? So ADH creates those aquaporins. Just real quick, my buddy thought, hey, I'm going to get around this. Now, he's a software engineer, so he don't know nothing about no science, clearly. So we were going to a baseball game, so he tried to make beersicles. But you had chemistry, didn't you? And you know that the freezing point of alcohol and the freezing point of water are very different. So what he had was frozen water, barley, and hops, and a little bit of alcohol. So the beersicles didn't work. Anybody here make beersicles? Okay. Did I ever tell you that same buddy peed over a van at County Stadium? You gotta admit, that's pretty good. Like, not one of those little minivans. I'm talking about like a whole full, like, Dodge cargo van. Right? You know how people can, like, squirt stuff out of their eye? You know? I know all the players' numbers from, like, 1973 to 1983, and he could pee over a van. How many people followed this? Listen up, because this is true. I'm going to write this down for you because it's nowhere else, just here. Got me? These two guys raise your blood pressure. This guy lowers your blood pressure. Are you with me? So these two guys inhibit A&P, and A&P inhibits these two guys.
Can you say that one more time?
A&P inhibits ADH and aldosterone release, and aldosterone and ADH inhibit A&P. Right? And that makes sense. If one lowers your blood pressure and the other two raise it, you don't want those two in this blood at the same time, right? Just like insulin and glucagon, right? So, just real quick, and then I'll give you a break. Did you ever hear of a condition called diabetes insipidus? No?
Yeah.
What is it? Well, you just heard of it, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's good. Diabetes insipidus is where these people have no ADH. So what are they doing all the time? They're peeing all the time. Right? Just think if you had to pee all the time. You get nothing done. How would you read the textbook? Well, you could bring it in the dang bathroom, couldn't you? And then the opposite of that is the syndrome of inappropriate ADH, where diabetes insipidus, no ADH, syndrome of inappropriate ADH secretion, too much ADH. Say yes, ADH. That'll come back and haunt you. All right, take a break. Kid's lazy.
Your kid?
Yeah.
I hear about him at work sometimes. His classes, for George.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What is George doing?
I don't know. Just George.
Yeah. So he goes, I asked him to go over and cut my sister's grass and pick up the leaves. Dad, it's snowing out and the grass is damp. So what? God. How old are your kids, Yumi?
4, 5, 10, and 12.
Yeah, wait. Wait.
Well, I'm not buying them houses, that's for sure. Hi. What are you staring at?
The back of that chair. I don't even know. I just wish people would do what I tell them to do. Life would be so much easier.
Still recording all the time.
Stuff. Not all of them.
That was a really rebellious teenager.
I kind of got a funny one because I'm half Hispanic, half Mexican. My dad is the one who's full Mexican, and the reason why we all like hot sauce is because that's how we were punished as a kid. So eventually, you just you would act like you hated it,
But you really liked it?
I really liked it.
Yeah.
That's what my aunt used to do to her kids.
It only works for so long.
My cousin used to get spanked with a belt, and my aunt did that to me once. And so when my mom came to pick me up, I said she smacked me with a belt, and my mom yelled at her. I was like, she's never coming back here again.
For real?
Yeah. Nobody was allowed to give me spankings or anything while I was at their
Well, that explains a lot. Yeah. Yeah, that's. Yeah. You ever hear of insanity sauce? No, it's like this really hot stuff. Then they have super insanity sauce. So I got this buddy. I can eat anything, any hot stuff, doesn't matter. So I give him this super insanity sauce, right? And his nose starts to bleed. I don't know. That's crazy. Super insanity sauce, right? Okay, here we go. All right, clock is operating. All right, so did I do the 3 hormones? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Hang on, I gotta pee now. those questions? Let me see. Okay. All right. One of the things they love to do in clinical now is it's called constructivism. It's a new way of teaching. You basically teach yourself. Right. Assuming that you have a background to be able to teach yourself. All right? So, watch. What's the goal of the cardiovascular system? Maintain blood flow, right? Maintain Q. Say yes. So, what are the two hormones that are used to increase blood pressure? ADH and aldosterone. So you need to understand this. Watch. If somebody is bleeding their own blood, and again, no one makes me bleed my own blood. No one. Okay. So watch. If you're bleeding your own blood, what's going to happen to your blood volume? Right? Now watch. Decrease venous return. Decrease stretch. Right? Decreased alignment of actin and myosin. So what's going to happen to the force of contraction of the heart? It's going to decrease, right? So that's going to decrease systolic blood pressure. When you decrease systolic blood pressure in the afferent arterial, what's activated? Yeah, I said it right. What's activated when you decrease systolic blood pressure in the afferent arterial? You activate the Renin-Angiotensin-Aldosterone system. Say yes. You got me? Watch. If you decrease blood volume because you're bleeding your own blood, what's the goal of the cardiovascular system? To maintain blood flow, right? So if blood volume decreases, what's going to happen to capillary fluid pressure? Right? Fluid pressure, right? And that is going to force fluid into from the interstitial space into the capillary. So what's going to happen to the osmolarity of the interstitial space? It's going to go up. So when you increase osmolarity within the hypothalamus, it will trigger two things. It's going to trigger thirst, and it's going to trigger the release of ADH from the posterior pituitary. Say yes. Both of those things are going to try to conserve water in the kidney and to try to raise your blood pressure. So when people are bleeding their own blood, two mechanisms are activated to try to get that blood volume back up. And it will prevent the formation of urine via the nephron. It will get that water that was going to get peed into the toilet back into the blood. Say yes. So there's a question. Explain in detail why urine output decreases if somebody is bleeding their own blood. And in that answer, you're going to explain to me the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone mechanism and the activation of ADH. Now, the mechanisms for ADH and aldosterone being released are different. One is related to a drop in blood pressure. The other is related to an increase in osmolarity. Say yes. Guys? All right. Did I tell you the story Christmas Eve? Did I tell you the Christmas Eve story? Guys? No. Real quick. There's a guy about 6-7 years ago, he sat right there, a good student, right? Young kid, says to me, hey Tim, my brother, he works putting in pools for really rich people, like in the Milwaukee area. And he's like, I was working with him, and he's peeing all the time, and he's drinking all the time, right? Water all the time. But like every 5 minutes, he's peeing. I go, is he diabetic? No, they went to the doctor. He said he's not diabetic. I said he's got a tumor in his pituitary. He's got diabetes insipidus. Right? So I don't hear nothing about it. Then on Christmas Eve at 9 o'clock, my cell phone blows up. I'm like, hello? And it's dude from class. He goes, Tim, my dad wants to talk to you. It's Christmas Eve. Will you talk to him? I'm like, yeah, I guess. So he said, what do you think is wrong with my son? I said, I think he's got diabetes insipidus, and I think he may have a benign tumor of his pituitary. He needs to see an endocrinologist and get a CAT scan of his brain. And then he says, is that expensive? I said, it is 9 o'clock on Christmas Eve. I am wrapping my son's Lego Star Wars set. Oh, I'm sorry to bother you. I said, well, it's a little bit late now, right? What do we need to do? I said, that's what you need to do. And then the removal of the tumor, they're almost always benign. It's no big deal. So I don't see the kid. He had a big white Ford truck, right? Like 6 months later, I see him parked there, and I'm coming in, Tim, you were right. He had a tumor of his pituitary, and he's straight now. He goes, how did you know? I go, technical college? I teach at a technical college? Do you follow?
You know everything we know.
Right. Just write that down. Are you following that? When you get a tumor of the pituitary, or really, for that matter, any part of the body, if it secretes a hormone, it either will cause no hormone to be secreted or a lot of it. And if he wasn't diabetic, the only way that you can get a lot of ADH released is if you have a tumor of the pituitary. So yeah. All right. Okay. So that's that. All right. So when you get question, what is it, number 9? 8. You're going to explain both mechanisms, aren't you? Aren't you? The Renin-Angiotensin-Aldosterone mechanism and ADH. Say yes. Okay, 1 done, 2 done, 3 I didn't do, 4 I didn't do, 5 I did, 6 I did, 7, 8, boom. I'm knocking this out. Okay, watch. What's more important? To maintain your pH or to maintain your potassium levels? Okay, watch. Write this down. In the nephron, remember I told you that two of the ions that are very difficult to filter by the glomerulus, but they have to be actively secreted, are hydrogen ions and potassium ions. Are you with me? Sodium is readily filtered by the glomerulus. You got me? Now, inside the glomerulus, inside the cells of the tubules, you have what's called the sodium-potassium exchanger. You got me? And normally, sodium and potassium are exchanged, where potassium is secreted into the collecting tubules and ultimately the urine, and sodium is brought back into the blood. Are you following this? Now, if you are in an acidosis, what's happening to the amount of free-floating hydrogen ions in the blood? It's going up. So what's more important, to maintain your potassium level or your pH? So when the amount of hydrogen ions in the blood, free-floating, goes up, the sodium-potassium exchanger no longer exchanges potassium for sodium. Instead, hydrogen ions are exchanged for sodium. And those hydrogen ions get dumped into the urine in an attempt to bring up the pH back to normal. So if you're not getting rid of potassium because you're instead getting rid of hydrogen ions, what's going to happen to the amount of potassium in the blood? It goes up. So acidosis leads to hyperkalemia. Say yes. Tell me you got that. That's very good. Now, I tried explaining the chemistry. Here, it just went poorly. So again, I'm going to skip a few steps, but it's okay. How the kidney basically controls the pH of the blood is this way. Remember, hydrogen ions have to be secreted. Bicarbonate can be filtered readily by the glomerulus. You got me? So, to maintain the pH of the blood, and remember that through metabolism, and even through, through metabolism, you make hydrogen ions, either directly or indirectly through CO2. So this little system is always in play. How you maintain the pH of the bud, yeah, you got to maintain that pH. Your pH is off, man. That bud don't have no kick. How you maintain the pH of your blood is by actively secreting hydrogen ions and then reabsorbing bicarbonate back into the blood. That's how the simplest way to explain how the kidneys help maintain the pH of the blood. Now watch. The kidney can correct any pH disturbance if you live long enough. You got me? But that's its basic mechanism. Say yes. You followed this. Okay. All right.
That all happens in the proximal, convoluted.
No, a lot of it happens there. It can happen anywhere along the collecting tubules, but you don't need to know where. All right. So.
It's recording.
Yeah. Okay, ready? Ready? Okay, watch. In DKA, what's your problem?
Acidotic.
Okay, what causes your acidosis? Right? More hydrogen ions. What caused the acidosis, though? In DKA?
You have to be
Ooh.
really sick, right? The diabetics no longer taking their insulin.
In DKA, they're a diabetic, right? They're either sick or they haven't taken their insulin. So what's their blood sugar up to?
500.
Yeah, your blood sugar's high. What up, G? Do you ever, like when people, like on TV, talk about glucose, do you ever just think like, what up, G? Yumi's got that disapproving look. What's the only fuel your brain can use? If you can't get glucose from the blood into the liver cell, what does the liver cell think is going on? You're starving, right? So the liver will take fat and convert it into beta-hydroxybutyric acid, acetoacetic acid, and acetone. Right? Those are called the ketones. And they are acidic. Say yeah. You got me? So what are you dumping into your blood ultimately? Free-floating hydrogen ions. Say yeah. Say yeah. So what's going to happen to the pH of your blood? It's going to go down. What can ultimately correct any pH disturbance if you live long enough, Benty? The kidneys. How do they correct it? By secreting hydrogen ions and reabsorbing bicarbonate, ultimately, say yes. But watch. If the amount of hydrogen ions goes up, what's another way you can get rid of them? The sodium potassium exchanger. Say yeah. So normally sodium and potassium are exchanged, but if the amount of hydrogen ions goes up because you're in DKA, you will start exchanging hydrogen ions for sodium. So what will happen to the amount of potassium in the blood? It goes up. Say yes. What's the second reason you develop hyperkalemia in DKA? What's the second reason?
No insulin.
So?
It inhibits the sodium potassium pump.
So?
So it's not working.
So what happens?
So your potassium is building up
Where?
in the blood because it's not going back into the cell.
That's high-level thinking. Do you understand that? Now watch. The only way you could have made that connection is by understanding the functions of insulin. Do you got that? What's the treatment for DKA? Give them insulin. They don't have any. Give them some. See how simple that is? Say yes. See how I related all that stuff? And basically day number 1, talking about pH. Then we talked about metabolism and DKA. Now we're talking about the darn kidney. Kidneys. I gave myself a high five for that. How many people followed that? That's rock solid. It is. And if, no.
I'm not happy.
I'm just stealing the test. Let's see. Explain 2 reasons why a patient at DKA would have hyperkalemia. Did Timmy do that? Of course I did. Okay. All right. Last but not least, I'm going to explain to you and I'll show you how to interpret arterial blood gases. You got me? Students don't get, like when you get into clinical, they don't even know what freaking pH is. And you think I'm lying? They don't. Right? So you're going to need to, you'll be way ahead of the game. You'll be better than everybody else. Right? You will be. And you can say it. I'm better than you. And mean it. Right, Ethan? Well, hey, give me money. I'm better than you. All right. So watch. Do doctors routinely order arterial blood gases? If a doctor is ordering arterial blood gases, you jacked up. You a hurting unit. And what they need to know are two of probably the most important things to know. What is the pH of the blood, and how much oxygen are you delivering the body? Say yes. So when you look at arterial blood gases and a physician orders them to be drawn, this is what you are going to see on your little sheet. You're going to see the pH. Then you're going to see the PO2, and we know that the PO2 is what? What is it a measure of? And what is it really measuring? Oxygen what? What? That's right. Oxygen dissolved in the plasma. Then you're going to look at O2 sat. What does O2 saturation of arterial blood actually measure? Yeah, that's right. Both of you guys. Did you have A&P juice at break?
No.
Oh, you should have said yeah. Okay.
I've got an extra credit.
You're really on that extra credit kick, aren't you? Do me a favor on Tuesday. Bring a tin cup and a monkey, because you're begging.
Okay, I'll do it.
PCO2, what does that measure? Randy?
Carbon dioxide, salt,
Yeah, that's right. Oh, you're the one that got PO2. Oh. Should have asked you. Randy, you're getting extra credit. All right, so watch. What's normal for your pH?
7.35.
Yeah, I mean, please. That's a 7. You got me? What's normal PO2? And remember, it's a pressure, so it's measured in millimeters of mercury. What's normal oxygen saturation of a red blood cell in the arterial end? Say yeah. And PCO2, normal arterial levels of PCO2 are 35 to 45 millimeters of mercury. Now, watch. Watch. I will never make you memorize, like, typically a lot of normal values, because if you look at arterial blood gases, they will give you the normals, and then they will give you the patient values. You got me? But for the kidney test, you're going to have to remember these. I'm not going to give them to you. Bicarbonate, 22 to 26. And because it's an electrolyte, it's measured as milliequivalents per liter. Do you remember that from quiz number 1? I mean, how could we forget? All right, now watch. Watch. When you look at arterial blood gases, the most important values show up first. You got me? So the pH shows up first. Then the PO2 and the O2 sat show up. Now, write this down. Directly, PO2 and O2 sat have no effect on the pH of the blood. They do not affect the pH of the blood directly. All these numbers tell you, all these numbers, PO2 and O2 sat, is whether or not you got to give some O's. Whether or not you have to give them oxygen. That's it. So if they're lower than normal, Give them some O's. Now, the two things that ultimately determine the pH of the blood, and I've been trying to ram them into your skull, are PCO2, which is controlled by the respiratory system, and bicarbonate, which is controlled by the kidneys. Are you with me, guys? All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through how you interpret an arterial blood gas, and then I'm going to give you a couple of examples, okay? Just so you know, I have a, oh wait, I'll take Joey Bag of Donuts line. I made this really great video on arterial blood gases. So there's 2 videos on arterial blood gases. Look at them, right? They will help you. I'm telling you that, right? And then some of the nursing instructors, they actually got on board, and they started using my videos to teach arterial blood gases. I get 1.2 cents every time somebody views that. So you know what I do? If I need some beer money, I just sit at home and go. Here we go. Write this down real quick. This is important. The most common type of acid-base disturbance, whether it be respiratory or metabolic, is an acidosis. So always look for the acidosis. You got me? And then clinically correlate. All right. The other thing, let's go back because you should know this. Sound like a nursing instructor. You should know this. Watch. What's the only system that can compensate for a metabolic acidosis? What's the only system that can compensate for a respiratory acidosis? Right, or what controls bicarbonate? The kidneys, right? Tell me you got that. So when you talk about interpreting blood gases, they really come in 3 flavors. Got me? Flavor number 1 is what's called an uncompensated. It's uncompensated. I'll give you examples. Number 2 is partial compensation. And then number 3 is fully compensated. All right? So I'm going to give you the definition of uncompensated, right? Uncompensated means that whatever system is causing that pH imbalance the system that can compensate for it has done nothing to help. You got me? A partial compensation means that whatever system is causing that pH imbalance the system that can compensate for it, help out, is working in the right direction. But the pH is still abnormal. I'll give you examples. And then finally, you have a fully compensated situation. And in a fully compensated situation, whatever system is causing the pH imbalance the system that can compensate is moving in the right direction, and the pH is normal. You probably don't follow that. So I'm going to give you an example. All right? So I'm going to give you an example of an abnormal blood gas, and then I'm going to walk you through the steps, and then I'm going to give you one and see if you can figure it out. Okay? Ready? Here we go. All right. So, the first thing you do when you look at a set of arterial blood gas, you look at the pH. So, what is that? Is the pH high, low, or normal? It's low, so it's an acidosis. All right? Remember that you look at PO2 and O2 sat, what? To simply what? Right, so if the PO2 is low and the O2 sat is low, you give them O's. Yep. Now what you want to do is you want to look at which system is causing this respiratory imbalance, or this pH imbalance. So you look at the PCO2 and you look at the bicarbonate. Is the PCO2 high, low, or normal? It's high. So if the CO2 is high, PCO2 is high, it's going to combine with WAWA, form carbonic acid, and it's going to break down to free flow. Boom. So what's causing this acidosis? This is a respiratory acidosis. Do you see this? What's the only system that can compensate for a respiratory acidosis? The kidneys. And we just got done there covering that. How did the kidneys compensate? If you got more hydrogen ions in the blood than normal, how do you get rid of those hydrogen ions? You dump them into the blood and you reabsorb what? Bicarbonate. So if the kidneys are helping out, what should happen to the level of circulating bicarbonate in the blood? It should go you're bringing more bicarbonate back into the blood. So the circulating bicarbonate in the blood should go up. Does the circulating level of bicarbonate in the blood, is it higher than normal? No. So this is an uncompensated respiratory acidosis. Do you see this? How many people see this? Yeah? All right. All right, you try this one. I'm going to update my Facebook status to trying to do. All right, who wants to try it? Go ahead, Kyle.
I said partially compensated respiratory acidosis.
That's a partially compensated respiratory acidosis. How many people got partially compensated respiratory acidosis? Right? So let's look at this. First of all, you look at the pH, right? It's an acidosis, correct? pH is below 7.35. PO2, O2 sat are low, give them O's. The PCO2 is high, yes? So all you really have to think about is CO2 is an acid, right? So if you elevate the PCO2, that's going to drop the pH. So this is a respiratory acidosis. Say yes. Then you look at the bicarbonate. The only system that can compensate, at least initially, for a respiratory acidosis is the kidneys. So the kidneys will compensate by dumping more free-floating hydrogen ions into the urine and then reabsorbing more bicarbonate back into the blood. So if the kidneys are helping, what should happen to the circulating level of free bicarbonate in the blood? It should go up. Is it higher than normal? Yes. So this is a partially compensated respiratory acidosis. Why is it partially compensated? The kidneys are moving in the right direction, but the pH is still acidic.
So what's going to make you decide on like respiratory versus metabolic? I guess mostly. What would make you determine that like it's metabolic acidosis?
Well, first of all, we know that bicarbonate is a base, right? So one of the things, and I'll show you right now. And this is where using previously understood information from quiz number 1 is going to come back and either save you or bite you in the left gluteal fold. That is to be determined. Watch. Let's say that through metabolism, the cells of the body are making more hydrogen ions than normal and dumping them into the blood. If they remain free floating, what will happen to the pH of the blood? But you have floating in your blood, our buddy, our pal, Mr. Bernie Bicarbonate. And what can bicarbonate do to those free-floating hydrogen ions? They can grab them and lock them up in carbonic acid. Say yes. Say yes. And carbonic acid then breaks down to CO2 and water. And what system controls carbon dioxide? So to determine if something is respiratory or metabolic, in this case, with a metabolic acidosis, what's going to happen when they draw arterial blood gases to the circulating level of free bicarbonate? It will go down. That's how you determine that. What's the only system, at least initially, that can compensate for a metabolic acidosis? And I told you that anything that causes the amount of free-floating hydrogen ions in the blood to go up, that will stimulate breathing, didn't I? I'll never forget it. It was definitely a Tuesday. So here we go. Try this one, and then we can ambulate.
You said you have a video on this?
Yeah, I got 2 videos. It's called Arterial Blood Gases 1 and Arterial Blood Gases B 2. All right? And explained step by step. Okay, try that. And don't hate. Ambulate. Just so you know, this little bottle here, little squirt bottle, it's got 70% alcohol in it. If you want to, before you leave, you can just take a quick swig off of it. Hey, do you want to swig off that? Well, that was very kind. Very kind response. No, thank you. Oh, I forgot to bring your cardiovascular quiz. I'll bring. Look, nobody's perfect. Right? Nobody even asked me about them anyways. Yumi, you're the kind of the class spokesperson. Why don't you say something? Huh?
I thought you were perfect. What happened to that? You just told us like 20 minutes ago. Yeah, exactly. Shh.
Right, I got nothing there.
Yeah, it's time for us to work this out.
Okay, are you done yet? Did it get like really awfully cold in this room all of a sudden?
It's been cold.
I think there's ghosts in this room.
Is her students coming to haunt?
You ever see that movie, The Sixth Sense? I had that too. Instead of seeing dead people, I see
Past students.
students failing. Get it, students failing.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, who wants to try it? Nobody? All right, Ethan. Rock on, buddy.
I think in uncompensated metabolic acidosis.
Oh!
Partially compensated metabolic acidosis.
This is a partially compensated metabolic acidosis.
Why is it perfect?
Well, I'm going to explain that to you, Randy. Ready? First of all, you look at the pH. Is that normal? That's an acidosis, right? Then you look at PO, give them some O's, right? Now you look at the PCO2. Is the PCO2 high, low, or normal? It's low. So if you, here, I'm covering up the bicarbonate with my hand. if you look just at the PCO2, you got me? Just at the PCO2, what should the pH be? You're hyperventilating. CO2 is an acid, so you are getting rid of acid. What should the pH be? That pH should be alkaline, but it is acidic. You got me? So the PCO2 is low because the respiratory system is trying to blow off more CO2 at the lungs because you are making more acid, hydrogen ions, at the cell. Yes or no? For real? Watch. This requires some really high level thinking. It does, right? It's like, you know, I would go over this. I'm like, how can you not figure that out? I'm like, look, it makes perfect sense to me. But this is the first time you're hearing this. Do you understand? That's why I put together those little videos, and watch, for your listening and working enjoyment, I put additional blood gas problems on Blackboard. Right? I want you to learn how to do this. I will personally give each one of you a check for $10,000 if you get through nursing clinicals and never have to do this. This is where people fail. They don't know this stuff. You're not going to fail, at least this part. Yeah?
So then for the uncompensated metabolic acidosis, the CO2 will be in range.
The PCO2 is normal. Yeah?
Well, because the respiratory isn't showing anything.
It ain't doing nothing.
Gotcha.
Do you follow that?
Yeah.
All right. And again, this takes some working, but at least you understand. Well, we went over the chemistry. Yeah? All right. Okay, watch. Watch. We're going to start the lymphatic system and the immune system and blood on Tuesday.
We finished everything?
Oh, are you kidding me? I knocked that thing out. We did.
So
So-
how does this quiz work?
So a week from Tuesday. So what day is that?
The 21st.
The 21st. You're going to take the respiratory and kidney quiz. It's going to be combined. You got me? So there'll be like 5 or 6 questions. Right? It's like 3 from respiratory and 3 from the kidney. Say yeah. You got me? So don't anticipate getting the kidney question. How does the kidney control pH? You got me? You're going to get ones that kind of put that stuff together. Do you follow that? Yes? All right, ambulate. Don't hate. What is that thing on the back of that phone? Is it like a stand?
It's the pop socket. Yeah, it's so that you can hold it better too, because this is stupid big. It's that 7 plus. And then I can
Oh.
tap